My name is Laurel Keaton. I'm 65. The morning I left Atlanta for good, the city looked almost kind, like it was pretending it hadn't wrung me dry for 4 decades. I'd signed the last set of papers 2 weeks earlier, handing over the textile company I built from scratch after my husband died. The new owners sent flowers and a polite email. I didn't reply. I bought an old farmhouse outside Asheville instead, on a stretch of land that smelled of pine and rain. The first morning there, the quiet startled me. No phone vibrating, no meetings, no hum of factory looms. Just birdsong and the soft hiss of dew sliding down the porch rail. I brewed coffee and carried it outside, watching mist lift from the pastures. The mug warmed my hands. The silence settled in my chest like something sacred. Henry had always wanted a place like this, a porch wide enough for rocking chairs, a view that slowed your breathing. He'd died long before I could afford one. Now I had it, and the emptiness of the second chair beside me felt almost like company. I filled the first weeks with small things, patching the garden fence, repainting the kitchen cabinets, learning which corner of the roof creaked in the wind. I found a local handyman, Ben, who worked slower than anyone I'd ever met and smiled like he knew it. There was comfort in that pace. The neighbors waved from a distance. Nobody asked about money, business, or family. For once, I wasn't anyone's provider. But peace, I've learned, has a short fuse. One afternoon, as I unpacked the last of the boxes in the study, my phone buzzed. It was my son, Adam, his name lighting up the screen like an old habit I couldn't break. I hesitated before answering. He talked about work, the city, his wife Tessa's new social media project. He didn't ask about the farm. When I mentioned it, he laughed. "Mom, you living with chickens and mud. You'll last a week." I smiled, though something inside me shifted. Maybe I said, "Or maybe I'll surprise you." When the call ended, the silence returned, steady, watchful, almost defiant. It felt like the beginning of something I hadn't planned, but maybe needed. When Henry died, Adam was 5, and the bills came faster than condolences. I stitched dresses for neighbors, then uniforms for a private school, then drapes for the lobby of a new hotel downtown. One job led to another, and by 40, I was running my own factory, Keaton Textiles, with 50 employees and no one to come home to. I used to joke that the machines were my choir. Their rhythm was steady, certain. When orders flooded in, I'd stay until midnight, the hum of the looms filling the hollow in my chest. Work became my way of staying upright. Adam grew up inside that rhythm. He had braces, piano lessons, private tutors. He never heard me say no, and maybe that was my mistake. I told myself I was giving him the life Henry wanted for us. In truth, I was trying to prove I could build something lasting out of grief. He went to college on the coast, then graduate school in Charlotte. When he landed a job in marketing, he called it branding storytelling. I called it selling air. Still, I was proud. I bought him his first car, paid the deposit on his apartment, and didn't complain when his visits home grew shorter and his calls less frequent. Then came Tessa, bright, camera-ready, always curating content. The first time we met, she filmed the dinner table before eating. She called my house retro and asked if I'd ever thought of modernizing the brand. I said the brand was me. She laughed like I'd told a joke. They married fast, lived faster. Adam started speaking in numbers engagements reach audience while I kept talking about fabric stitches texture. Sometimes I wondered if we even spoke the same language anymore. Now when he calls, there's always noise in the background. Music, voices, laughter that doesn't include me. And yet I can't blame him completely. I built his world brick by brick, but I never taught him to value the ground it stood on. I taught him ambition, not appreciation. They arrived on a Saturday afternoon, the kind of day when the air hung thick with summer. I'd spent the morning baking cornbread and setting the table with my old china small gestures, maybe foolish ones, but habits of someone who still believes in manners. When the black SUV pulled into the gravel drive, I saw them through the kitchen window. Adam stepped out first, taller than I remembered, his phone already in his hand. Tessa followed, sunglasses perched on her head, holding a designer tote as if the countryside might stain it. The moment she crossed the porch, she wrinkled her nose. No air conditioning in every room and no Wi-Fi. "How do you survive out here?" I smiled lightly. "Fresh air does most of the work." She laughed, not cruelly, but carelessly, as if my answer were quaint. Adam reached for her shoulder, murmuring something about city standards. His tone, half defense, half apology. I didn't bother to correct him. Inside, she ran her fingers over the handmade quilts folded on the sofa. "You made these, wow, so vintage." Before I could answer, she angled her phone toward the window, posing with one. "Hashtag rustic retreat," she said. The shutter clicked without permission. Lunch was quiet. She pushed the vegetables around her plate, asked if there was almond milk for her coffee, then whispered something to Adam that made him smile awkwardly. I kept my focus on the sound of forks against china, steady and sharp. Afterward, they walked the property. I followed from a distance, watching Tessa step gingerly through the grass, heels sinking into the earth. Adam gestured toward the barn and said something about potential. She asked if I'd ever considered renting the place out. People would pay a fortune for this aesthetic. By evening, their laughter faded into the hum of the car engine. When the taillights disappeared down the hill, the silence returned heavier than before. I carried the dishes to the sink, washed each one slowly, then stepped onto the porch. The air had cooled the crickets, starting their night chorus. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, trying to decide what hurt more, the loneliness or the realization that my own son had learned to find me embarrassing. The mountains didn't answer. They only held the quiet a little longer. A week passed after their visit, though the air in the house still felt unsettled. I spent my mornings pruning the hydrangeas, my afternoons patching an old chair in the parlor. Routine, I've learned, is a kind of armor. The rhythm of small tasks keeps anger from finding words. That Friday, just as the sun began to slip behind the ridge, the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was too peaceful a moment to share. But the screen lit up with Adam's name, and habit won again. "Hey, Mom." His voice was bright, too bright. "We're coming to the farm this weekend." I set down the trowel. Yeah, me, Tessa, her mom, her sisters, her cousins. Maybe 10 people total. You'll love them. They've been dying to see the place. The words landed like pebbles hitting glass, small but sharp. 10 people, I asked slowly. "Adam, the house isn't..." He cut me off, tone cheerful but dismissive. "Mom, relax. It's just a weekend. We'll bring food, music, make it fun. If it's too much for you, you can always head back to the city for a few days." For a moment, I thought the connection had dropped. I could hear the faint hum of crickets through the open window, the rustle of leaves against the porch rail. My hand stayed still on the phone. "Go back to the city," he'd said, as if this house, my house, were a vacation rental he'd booked. "Adam," I began, but my voice came out thinner than I wanted. "That's not..." "Don't worry, Mom," he interrupted again, breezy as ever. "Tessa's handling the details. Just be ready for company." Then the line went dead. The sky outside had gone gold at the edges, the kind of light that softens everything except the truth. I stood there for a long time, the phone still warm in my hand. Finally, I placed it on the table and walked to the porch. The evening smelled of rain and iron. Somewhere far off, thunder rumbled, a low, patient sound. "All right," I whispered. The word surprised me, steady but quiet, like a match striking in the dark. Inside that single syllable, everything shifted. Grace on the outside. Fury underneath. I didn't sleep that night. The storm that had threatened all evening finally broke, shaking the windows and filling the gutters with rain. I sat at the kitchen table watching the lightning flicker over the fields and felt something settle inside me. Not anger exactly, but a kind of clarity I hadn't known in years. At dawn, I called Ben, my retired neighbor, who still came by to mend fences and talk about weather as if it were scripture. He arrived with 2 peaches and a bottle of homemade wine, as if he'd already guessed this wouldn't be an ordinary morning. I told him about Adam's call about the 10 uninvited guests, about being told to go back to the city. Ben listened without interrupting, then leaned back in his chair and said, "Well, sounds like your piece could use a little discipline." A few hours later, Marina, my part-time housekeeper, stopped by to drop off clean linens. I asked her to sit. Together over glasses of Ben's peach wine, we drew up a list that looked nothing like revenge and everything like boundaries. The Wi-Fi router would be locked in the pantry. All but 2 sets of sheets and towels would disappear. The fridge would hold nothing but fresh vegetables and milk from the local farm. And on the kitchen table, a handwritten note would wait. "Welcome to rural life. Tools are in the shed if you need to make it work." Marina laughed so hard she had to wipe her eyes. "Señora, that's going to teach them more than Sunday school ever could." Ben added his own contribution, a harmless one. "I'll leave Daisy in the kitchen," he said. "She's a polite goat. Doesn't chew much. Keeps folks alert." By evening, the plan was in motion. I packed a small bag for Asheville, left keys with Ben, and checked the porch light one last time. When I locked the door, I realized I was smiling. Really smiling for the first time in months. The air outside smelled like wet earth and second chances. By Saturday noon, the gravel road echoed with the crunch of tires and too much confidence. 3 black SUVs rolled to a stop in front of the farmhouse engines, humming like they owned the land. Tessa stepped out first, wrapped in a linen shawl and heels that sank instantly into the dirt. "It smells like animals," she shrieked, waving her hand in front of her face. Her family poured out behind her mother, sister's cousins all dragging matching silver suitcases and clutching phones like lifelines. One young cousin pointed his selfie stick toward the barn. "Get closer to the goat," someone laughed. The front door opened with a dramatic swing, and then came the silence that always follows disbelief. Ben's goat Daisy bleated from the kitchen, calmly chewing on a stray curtain tie. The counter was lined with vegetables, tomatoes, squash carrots, fresh but unwashed. The air smelled faintly of hay and rain. "Where are the towels?" Tessa's mother demanded, glancing around. Her voice had the edge of someone unaccustomed to being denied. "In the— Oh my God," Tessa cut in. "There are no sheets." "Are we supposed to sleep on bare mattresses?" Her cousin fumbled with his phone. "No Wi-Fi. Nothing. Not even a signal." Tessa turned toward Adam, incredulous. "Call your mother." He already had. 5 times. Each call went straight to voicemail. Within minutes, complaints turned to accusations. "Your mom's losing it," one sister muttered. "She did this on purpose," said another. "Who even lives like this?" Tessa snapped. "This isn't charming. It's insane." Adam tried to calm them, pacing across the porch, phone in hand, jaw tight. He told them his mother was old-fashioned, that it must have been some kind of misunderstanding. But the heat, the goat, and the absence of Wi-Fi made his defense sound thin even to him. By mid-afternoon, they had given up pretending it was a vacation. They loaded the suitcases back into the SUVs, Daisy bleeding as if to say goodbye. The engines started again, one after another, and the convoy rolled back down the hill toward Asheville. Later, Ben told me that the story spread through the valley before sunset. The neighbors called it the socialite stampede. Someone's teenage daughter posted a photo of the empty driveway with the caption, "Tessa's retreat turned rustic, real rustic." That evening, as the last light faded from the windows, the farmhouse stood untouched, the air thick with the smell of rain and quiet triumph. The goat settled down near the stove, chewing softly, and for the first time in a long while, the house was exactly what I'd meant it to be, peaceful, unapologetically mine. I spent the weekend at Jean's cottage just outside Asheville. She'd been my friend since the early textile days, the kind of woman who never softened her opinions or her whiskey. We sat on her porch as the sky dimmed the hum of cicadas filling the air. On the table between us, my phone streamed the feed from the farmhouse camera. For a while, we laughed until tears blurred the image, Tessa's dramatic gestures. Adam pacing helplessly, the goat nosing into their luggage. But when the laughter faded, a strange quiet took its place. I watched Tessa's mother storm toward the SUV, finger pointed like a weapon. And suddenly the humor thinned. Maybe I went too far, I murmured. Jean refilled my glass without looking up. No, honey. You just reminded them you're not a doormat. I wanted to believe her. God, I did. But as the feed froze on the empty porch, suitcases gone, sunlight retreating from the wooden steps, I felt that familiar ache settle behind my ribs. The same one that used to visit me after long nights at the factory, when victory came wrapped in exhaustion. Power, I was learning, has a cost, even when you use it right. Jean leaned back, her voice gentle now. You drew a line, Laurel. That's not cruelty. That's survival. I nodded, though the wine in my glass trembled slightly. Outside, the mountains turned violet, then blue, then black, and for the first time in weeks, the silence felt heavier than peace. 2 days later, the crunch of tires on gravel pulled me from my thoughts. Through the window, I saw Adam's car inching up the drive. No entourage, no noise. Just him. He stepped out slowly. Shoulders drawn, the confidence that usually preceded him stripped away. When he knocked, I didn't make him wait. I opened the door and gestured toward the kitchen. The silence between us was thick, but not hostile, like the pause before a storm that might finally clear the air. He sat at the table where we'd shared 100 family breakfasts, his hands clasped so tightly they turned pale. Mom, he began, voice low. What was that? I poured him coffee and took the chair across from him. A boundary, I said. You told me to leave, so I did. And you told me you were coming, so I let you. He looked up startled, then dropped his eyes again. For a long moment, all I heard was the slow tick of the kitchen clock and the faint bleat of Ben's goat outside. Finally, he whispered, I guess I forgot whose house it is. That's not all you forgot, I said softly. You forgot how to ask instead of assume. The words hung in the air, firm, but not cruel. His shoulders sank, and for the first time in years, I saw traces of the boy I'd raised, not the man who mistook comfort for entitlement. We talked for hours about pride, about money, about how love becomes habit until it stops feeling like love at all. There were tears, yes, but not the angry kind, just the quiet kind that carry something heavy away. When he finally reached across the table and took my hand, I didn't pull away. The silence that followed wasn't heavy anymore. It was whole. The next morning, sunlight slipped across the kitchen floor, touching the mug between us. Adam sat quietly, hands folded, no phone in sight. I've been thinking, I began, about the money I send every month. It stops now. He lifted his head, ready to speak, but I raised a hand gently. I'm not cutting you off, I said. I'm setting you free. Something in his face softened. No defensiveness this time, no polished arguments. Just silence and understanding. I know, he said finally. I should have stopped expecting it long ago. We sat like that for a while, the air between us no longer heavy. Then I added, if you visit, let me know first. I need time same as you. He nodded. Of course. His voice was steady, not rehearsed. As he stood to leave, he hesitated at the doorway. Mom, he said quietly, the word unfamiliar on his tongue. It wasn't formal, like mother, the name he used when distance felt safer. I smiled. That's better. He smiled back, then walked toward his car, the gravel crunching softly under his feet. The house was still again, but not lonely, just balanced finally on equal ground. Weeks passed quietly. The air grew warmer, the garden greener. I spent my mornings tending the herbs and my afternoons mending small things, Old habits I'd nearly forgotten. One Saturday, I heard a familiar car on the road. Adam stepped out alone this time, carrying a bag of groceries and the old quilt frame that had broken years ago. He'd sanded and stained it himself. "Thought you might want this fixed," he said shyly. "Tessa?" I asked. "She stayed in Charlotte," he answered. No bitterness, just fact. We cooked together that evening, rosemary chicken, sweet corn, and the first tomatoes from my garden. Conversation came easily lighter than it had been in years. He told me about work, about how he'd been cooking more at home. I told him about Daisy, who'd finally stopped trying to climb onto the porch swing. We laughed. After dinner, I walked outside as the sun melted behind the hills. The air shimmered with that soft Carolina gold before fading into blue. I reached for the old porch light, its brass edges dulled with time, the one my husband had wired himself decades ago, and turned it on. "This light used to mean waiting," I whispered. "Now it just means home." Inside, my phone buzzed on the table. A message from Adam. "Next time I'll bring just one person, me." I smiled, turned the phone face down, and left the light burning. The night deepened around the house, calm and complete, the kind of peace that doesn't ask for permission, only presence.